My background and current engagements is Peltarion, AI Sweden, and the Swedish AI Council. Peltarion is a platform company. It's been around for a long time. I have a big group of data scientists and AI experts. It's a platform for making it easier to build and deploy AI models into products and services for startups and large organizations. I'm not selling the product. I'm just explaining why that I've been in contact for the last few years with many different organizations and many different problems working there. And now also with AI Sweden, the National AI Center, where we're tasked by the government to try to accelerate the application of AI in Sweden in the public, private, and startup sectors. I mean, you all know and heard about AI. Everyone's talking about it. Very few people completely understand it. My take on it is, I guess, an economic and end-use perspective. When the transistor arrived, it brought down the cost of math and made it more available for everyone. When internet came along, it brought down the cost of distributing information. It made it so much easier for everyone to distribute information. That's why we live in the world we live in today, where Joe Rogan has 190 million listeners every month, more than the three largest media houses in the world combined. And what AI does is basically it brings down the cost of predictions, makes it much more available. So what doctors do today and lawyers and very, very advanced professions, AI can help you do at a fraction of the cost. And if you ask those who've been around for a while, this is Kevin Kelly, founder of Wide, they all agree that AI will in some shape or form be at the core of every successful startup. And if you listen to the CEO of Google, he compares AI with the invention of fire. And I think you should, if they compare it with fire, it's probably something we shouldn't disregard. Obviously, I'm biased because I work with this and I'm super passionate about this, but still, I think it's important to remember. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but also important to remind ourselves that we're all using AI every day. Whenever we search on Google, Google is using AI and deep learning to create fantastic predictions on what the best search results are. Siri and Google Home and Alexa, they use AI at all times. Tesla using AI, their stock is a little bit higher than 307 today. But also when you kind of look at price points in all e-commerce, most successful e-commerce platforms, this is Airbnb, use AI to suggest the best price point per individual to make them convert and buy stuff. If you're not using this in some way or form, you're probably not converting as good as your competition. And I don't really care. Well, I tend to nerd down into how things work, but I think AI and artificial neural networks are simply better and faster calculators that you don't have to put that many rules into anymore. And it's a kind of simulation of the brain in the way that children learn by seeing things and doing things. Neural networks, we show them things, we show them multiple types of data, and eventually they learn to come up with patterns that can draw conclusions and predict outcomes. And I've focused on deep learning for the last few years, and I think the fantastic thing with deep learning is that it's actually for developers and many people who come from an engineering background, it's kind of simpler to use than traditional machine learning, because traditional machine learning still used feature-based rule-based systems, whereas deep learning models can be applied much, much easier and reused. And the neat thing with deep learning is that you can combine different types of data, images, sound, tabular data, and just keep on improving the accuracy. And once you've trained the model successfully for one thing, for instance, a language problem, then you can retrain it using more specific language. So if we train the model to be really good at a generic language, we can retrain using the same structure on using legal terms. and then we can reuse models. So we can learn and share with each other. And I'll get back to this learning and sharing. But all of this has led to some amazing breakthroughs in automation and prediction. For instance, if we look at self-driving cars that have come a long way in the last few years, none of these systems would have been possible if we had been forced to program them with rule-based systems. If a cat crosses the road, if a bird and in this kind of weather, it would have just been impossible to create that logic. Instead, we use all the video and sensors from all these cars on millions and millions of miles of roads, and eventually these models learn to drive the cars themselves. And I think the most important thing, or the most interesting thing, is the way how we learn as humans, and that is not with theory and academics and all the minutiae of AI, but it's by the practical examples. So I'm going to spend most of the time on that. Going back to Tesla, I think one of the most amazing things they've used AI for, first machine learning and then moving into deep learning, is the optimization of their batteries, charging and discharging and balancing. So for a long time, for many years now, they've had longer ranges than all of their competitors. First now, they're starting to catch up. But that was really where they gained a competitive advantage for a long, long time. Just using all the data from the battery and the discharging and all the electricity to just make it better. This is a company I've been working with a lot. They're called Sybase, based in Stockholm. They're using electric spectroscopy, electrical impulses to detect skin cancer, and also now asthma, allergies, and eczema. The electric impulses, the AI model uses the electric impulses to detect and predict anomalies in the skin barrier, and thereby detecting skin cancers and atopic dermatitis. And they do that better than lab analysis, which is just amazing. This means that we can check newborn babies very early and see if they have the tendency to develop asthma, allergy, and eczema, and help them not develop that, and help them to better lives. This is a company called Niramai in India. They use Android phones. They give them to nurses, paired with FLIR cameras, infrared cameras, to pre-screen for breast cancer. And the models detect tumors a fifth of the size of traditional mammography. But the most important thing is nurses can do this in the countryside all over India for all ages without even having to touch the patient. A procedure that all women from a certain age know is quite uncomfortable, where you have to take your breast and squeeze them into a machine in the traditional way. This is used all around the world, or not all around the world, but in various places around the world, using image segmentation to detect brain cancer. And this very similar technique to detect other objects, but this is a very specific use case. And what it enables, I think, is the interesting thing. The traditional method is that you go in for an MRI, we do the scan, we find the tumor, and then you wait a few days or a few weeks to go into the gamma ray machine and radiate away your tumor. But in that time, the tumor may have changed, shifted, or grown, and you miss something, or you cut away healthy parts of the brain. Using this method, they're able to scan the brain in real time while doing the procedure. And also it's at the same accuracy levels as the best radiologist in the world, but they do it in 1 millisecond instead of 1 to 2 hours. Using the same technology, image segmentation, combined with other AI methods, but different spectrums of infrared. Looking at a project where we look at satellite images to identify crop types and soil nutrients, and also predict what type of crop is best for that particular field and what type of fertilizer. I think this is a really good use of AI, because no humans would be able to look through thousands or millions of satellite images and make this analysis in real time. In the US, this is OneDrop using a variation of subjective input and medical data to predict glucose levels for diabetes patients or people with diabetes, but also lifestyle recommendations. Epidemic Sound here in Stockholm use AI to classify their music, which gives them a baseline that is the same for all of their company. This is a great example where it used to be subjective and related to the human who classify the music, and every human has different tastes. Now they're able to get a coherent baseline across the company and do it much faster, of course. Emotion detection. Bad and good examples. Bad examples we've seen in the media where police forces and security or intelligence departments around the world want to use this to predict crime. But there's also using the technique to, instead of putting a psychologist in a room in a focus group, you can actually detect emotions and see how people react to different situations in product testing. Retail and logistics, Amazon uses AI everywhere, from their website to procurement to robots in their warehouses, and they have such an advantage over many other competitors. The last example is a company here in Stockholm called Sana Labs, which I think is fantastic. They work with an education platform that customize education to people, and people are able to learn better if they get individualized curriculums. And they tested this in the field on fourth graders, kids who learn math with individualized learning plans learn 50% more than kids who follow a standardized plan. I think the last bit before we move into the questions or discussions is BERT. I think this will apply to most fields, BERT or NLP, and also lately GPT-3, which is natural language processing and being able to find similar text and understanding text in its whole. That means that AI now, since last year, can understand the difference between these two sentences, whereas previously we've had to use individual words and logic to kind of pair individual words together. That means that you can put in an entire text and do a search for similar texts. For instance, if you're a journalist, okay, I'm writing a draft for an article, I can do a search for similar stuff and do background research in seconds. And over the summer, there's been a lot of discussion about OpenAI's new model GPT-3, trained on millions of text and is amazing at generating text, which basically means you can auto-generate a lot of text. My work in AI Sweden will circle around AI in Swedish healthcare. One of the use cases there is obviously to just basically listen to a doctor-patient discussion and in real time recommend diagnose code, but more importantly, be able to do an instant literature search from all relevant research from all around the world to provide the doctor with the best and latest information. And we have 1 minute left, so I'm gonna just jump to the final bit, which I think is this. If I want you to remember 3 things, I would say AI is not a technical challenge, it's business critical. And use AI to enhance your core value proposition, the core problem you're working on in your startup or your organization. Don't just do it for fun. Chatbots are still not the best way to use AI. And most importantly, I would say, don't reinvent the wheel. Probably someone else has already been doing something in your field. Do some research, email them, pick up the phone. People in China, in the US, in Canada, in Africa or India will probably want to help you and share their learnings, and you can save years of time by doing that. They might even share data sets and models, which is my experience. And if you want to learn things, this is my last page. I put together a document, bit.ly/UPPSTART 2020, with 10 pages of different learning links about AI that anyone can download. We have a book. You can email me to get your copy of the book that we created. It's a 30-minute read. The Finnish government, together with Reactor and University of Helsinki, launched Elements of AI 2 years ago, a free online course. It's fantastic. And obviously, there's a free version of the Peltarion platform if you want to just try out modeling and follow tutorials. So that's me, and feel free to send me an email if you have any questions about how to get involved or get contacts or learn more stuff about AI. I'm now working a lot with trying to accelerate AI in all of Sweden, so that's my job. So I'll type the link here. Any questions that you want to discuss and talk about? Usually there's a few more slides in an hour, but I had to squeeze it into 15 minutes. Victor, where should one start? I would say start with start with learning about AI, just researching or Googling good uses of AI, fun uses of AI, the actual end product, and then think about what kind of problem am I interested in solving, and then narrow down your search. And then when you do that, you will start just experimenting with using AI.